The first time I saw Redwood Global's headquarters. It looked less like a building and more like a monument. A skyscraper of glass and steel slicing into the midtown sky. Polished to a shine that dared anyone walking by to question who owned the city. Most people stopped at the revolving doors to catch their breath, fix their ties, maybe whisper a prayer before stepping inside. Not me. I wasn't built to play small. But I'd be lying if I said the sight didn't press something heavy into my chest. This wasn't just another Monday. Walking into Redwood felt like history pressing its thumbprint against my skin. The lobby stretched out like a mirror. Marble floors gleaming under fluorescent light. Every heel click echoed louder than it should have, like my steps were daring the tower to try and erase me. I remembered my mama's words, her voice tired but firm after long shifts on factory floors. Kendra. Baby, don't you ever shrink yourself to fit inside somebody else's picture frame. Redwood was a picture frame if there ever was one. Clean suits, Ivy League smiles, pedigrees passed down like heirlooms. A club for people born with their names already etched into brass plaques. I wasn't invited. I broke in. From the beginning, I was the one with the wrong zip code, the wrong pedigree, the wrong story. Except my talent spoke louder than their rules. They didn't know what to do with me. I wasn't loud, but I wasn't silent. I wasn't hostile, but I sure wasn't going to play the token. So I did the one thing they couldn't argue with. I outworked them. When their cars rolled out of the garage, mine stayed parked. When they strolled in with fresh coffee, I had already filed reports and drawn up strategies. The whispers followed fast. She's ambitious. She's aggressive. Words that stuck to women like weapons but landed as compliments when thrown at men like Logan or Martin. I didn't flinch. I let my work speak in languages their mouths couldn't twist. Brick by brick, I climbed, analyst to associate, associate to senior lead, until one morning I walked into the boardroom not as a guest. Not as a seat warmer. But as a decision maker. That boardroom wasn't made to welcome me. 20 feet of glass table stretched like a moat. Leather chairs creaking under the weight of men who thought they were kings. The walls pulsed with stock tickers and digital maps glowing with markets they ruled like empires. And then there was me. The only black woman in the room. Every glance a microscope. Every breath a calculation. Speaking in that room was survival. My numbers had to sing. My strategies had to sting. I didn't want them to just hear me. I wanted them to feel me. Sometimes, they did. But more often, the sideways smiles told a different story. Good job, Kendra, said like a pat on the head for coloring inside the lines. They didn't know I wasn't there to color. I was there to paint the whole mural. The higher I climbed, the heavier it felt. Failure they expected. Success? That scared them. By my 5th year, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I carried my mama's scars. My brother's night shifts. My community's weight. Every step I took was a doorway I couldn't let close behind me. And that's when I started noticing the cracks. Redwood's glass tower gleamed, but beneath the shine, the foundation shook. Deals bent under scrutiny. Numbers blurred if you looked too close. Promises vanished before the ink dried. I didn't know it yet, but those cracks were waiting for me. One Thursday morning, I presented a strategy I'd crafted piece by piece. Airtight and ready, the board leaned in. Even Logan, who never treated me as more than a visitor in his kingdom, looked restless. But before I finished, Martin slid a folder across the table, cutting through my voice. We've decided to go in a different direction. My slides still lit the screen. My words still hung in the air. But my work was already gone. Passed like a baton to someone who couldn't even spell logistics. Heat climbed up my throat. No one said a word. Chairs shifted. Pens tapped, eyes glued to tablets. And then Monday came. The day they didn't just sideline me. They gutted me. The boardroom smelled of burnt espresso and nerves masked with cologne. Logan sat at the head of the table. Martin to his right, the rest murmuring low until silence spread like smoke. Logan's voice broke it. As you all know, Redwood is entering a period of restructuring. Restructuring, a word that always meant someone was about to bleed. He slid another folder across the glass. Effective immediately, Kendra's portfolio will transition to Martin's oversight. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Eyes darted. Pens clicked. Nobody looked at me. I leaned back, forcing calm. Redistribute? I asked, my tone steady though my chest burned. Care to explain why the portfolio I built from the ground up is suddenly in need of redistribution? Logan didn't blink. It's not personal. It's business. Business. Their shield for cruelty. Martin cleared his throat, trying on humility like an ill-fitting suit. I'll do my best to carry forward what Kendra's started. Of course, I'll add some of my own adjustments to the strategy. Adjustments. The word nearly made me laugh. He couldn't adjust a tie without help, let alone systems I'd built out of nothing but grit. But no one called him out. The same men who once praised my vision now stared holes into their screens. Then came the applause. Soft, polite, deadly. They clapped as if they hadn't just erased me. As if my years of sweat were nothing but chalk dust on their glass table. The meeting ended. Chairs scraped back. Voices rose. Business rolled on. I stayed seated, knuckles white against the armrests. Logan brushed behind me, leaned down, his whisper ice cold. You're talented, Kendra, but sometimes, people don't fit the picture the company wants to paint. And just like that, he walked away. I sat there, staring out at the city, my reflection glaring back at me in the glass. No tears, no begging, just silence heavy enough to crack bone. That night, I walked Midtown's streets, neon lights buzzing above, subway rumbling below, faces rushed past, tired and carrying their own battles. And I thought of my mama, my brother, every person who'd ever swallowed the lie that they didn't belong. Redwood hadn't just cut me out. They'd tried to cut out everyone I carried with me. But they made a mistake. By the time I unlocked my apartment door, the fire inside me had already settled into something sharper. They thought they had broken me. But Redwood hadn't cut me. They had sharpened me. And soon, they'd learn the cost of underestimating a woman who refused to disappear. The weeks that followed were a study in silence, strategic, suffocating silence. My colleagues didn't outright exclude me. But I could feel the shift in every hallway glance. Every meeting invite that never reached my inbox. People whispered when I walked by. And even when they didn't, I could hear the weight of what wasn't being said. Corporate politics didn't need volume. It thrived on absence. On erasure. I kept my head down. But my mind was racing. Every late night at my desk, every draft report glowing on my laptop screen became more than work. It became evidence. I started documenting everything. Emails that were forgotten. Edits made to my projects without my consent. Credit given to someone else for the hours I poured in. I built a quiet archive. A record that no one knew existed. Still, the pressure was relentless. There were moments I'd lock myself in the bathroom just to breathe. Gripping the edge of the sink. Staring into the mirror at the woman staring back at me. She looked tired, but she looked determined. Mama's voice echoed in my head. They can underestimate you. But don't you dare underestimate yourself. One Friday evening, long after most of the office lights had gone dark, I found myself staring out the window from the 32nd floor. The city stretched out below, glittering and restless, like it held secrets of its own. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, eyes sharp. Jaw set. Somewhere deep down, I knew I wasn't the same Kendra who had walked into this job with nothing but ambition and faith. This version of me was harder, more deliberate, less forgiving. That's when I noticed the small things start to shift. A sympathetic nod from Tanya in accounting when she slipped me a file that mysteriously went missing. A side conversation with Marcus from IT, who whispered that he'd seen certain emails rerouted before they ever reached my inbox. It was like the cracks in the machine were beginning to show. And I wasn't the only one who had noticed. But allies in a place like this came at a cost. Trust was currency, and I couldn't afford to spend it recklessly. I played my role carefully, professional, unbothered, the perfect picture of composure, while underneath, I was threading every piece together. Every lie, every slight, every attempt to push me out was becoming part of a bigger story. My story. The turning point came one late afternoon when I was called into a meeting I hadn't been told about. I walked into the glass-walled conference room. And there they were, 3 executives. All men, all older, all looking at me like I was a problem to be managed. On the table sat a stack of papers, my latest proposal. But stripped down, gutted, my name nowhere in sight. I felt my chest tighten. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I sat down, smoothed my skirt, and listened as they praised the collaborative effort that had gone into the project. Collaborative. That word tasted bitter. One of them glanced at me. Maybe to see if I'd react. Maybe to remind me of my place. But I just smiled, pen poised above my notepad, and nodded along. Because what they didn't know was that I had the original file saved. Time-stamped, backed up on 3 separate drives. What they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment since the first time they tried to erase me. That night, when I got home, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. I opened the folder labeled, "Just in Case," a quiet rebellion I had nurtured in the shadows. Inside were months of careful documentation. Patterns too clear to dismiss. Truths too sharp to ignore. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I let myself smile, not the polite, corporate smile I wore in meetings, but a real one, sharp, knowing, dangerous. They thought they were silencing me. What they were really doing was giving me the story I needed. The fuel I'd been waiting for. The war hadn't started yet, but I could feel it coming. And this time, I wasn't walking in unarmed. The Monday after that meeting, I walked into the office with a kind of calm that surprised even me. My heels clicked steady against the marble floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat. People glanced up from their desks as I passed, their eyes curious, cautious. They didn't know it yet, but something in the air had shifted. I had spent the entire weekend piecing together my archive into something undeniable. Every screenshot, every deleted email, every draft with my name stripped from the title page. I laid them out like puzzle pieces until the image was clear. It wasn't just negligence. It was theft, targeted and deliberate. But here's the thing about corporate theft. It rarely happens in the shadows of one person. There were fingerprints everywhere, traces of collusion, whispers of complicity, and the higher I looked, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about a system built to keep women like me, black women, at the margins, visible enough to exploit, invisible enough to discard. That morning, I played the part they expected. I sat in the weekly check-in, nodding, typing notes, letting them mistake my silence for submission. Inside, though, my mind was running a marathon. Every smile I gave was a calculated pause. Every question I asked was designed to make them underestimate me just a little more. After the meeting, I slipped into the copy room where the hum of the machines drowned out everything else. Tanya found me there, leaning against the counter with a file in her hands. She looked at me the way a sister looks when she knows you're carrying more than you should. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, but my voice betrayed me. "They're trying to write me out of my own work." Tanya's lips tightened. She glanced at the door, then back at me. "Then don't let them. You think you're the first they've tried this with? The only difference is, you're smart enough to see it before it's too late." Her words lingered long after she walked away. It wasn't comfort, it was challenge. And I accepted it. That evening, as the office emptied, I stayed behind. The city lights shimmered outside the glass, and I felt like I was staring down an opponent much bigger than me. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I didn't need to fight them on their terms. I needed to set the stage for my own kind of battle. So I crafted a plan. Step 1. Secure the evidence. Not just the files I had collected, but the testimonies of people who had seen the discrepancies firsthand. Marcus from IT owed me a favor. Last year I'd covered for him when a system crash threatened to expose mistakes that weren't entirely his fault. And Tanya, well, Tanya didn't just owe me, she believed in me. That mattered more than debt. Step 2. Build visibility. If they were trying to silence me, I'd make sure my voice reached beyond these walls. I began drafting an article, a thought piece on diversity and accountability in corporate spaces. On the surface, it was polished, professional, nothing but business, but underneath, it carried the weight of my story, anonymized, sharpened, undeniable. Step 3. Choose the battleground. I knew better than to confront them in a closed room where power tipped entirely in their favor. No, I wanted daylight. I wanted transparency. I wanted witnesses. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A company-wide town hall was scheduled for the following week. Executives would be on stage. Employees filling the atrium. Questions, welcomed, but rarely asked. It was theater, meant to reassure us that leadership cared. But I saw it for what it was. A stage with a microphone. Every night leading up to it, I rehearsed what I might say. In the shower, while cooking dinner, even lying awake staring at the ceiling, I shaped the words over and over until they were smooth as glass but sharp as knives. I didn't want emotion to betray me. I wanted clarity, precision, impact. But even as I planned, doubt gnawed at me. What if they turned it against me? What if I became the problem? The angry black woman they warned each other about behind closed doors? What if stepping forward meant losing everything I had worked for? I thought of Mama again. Her hands calloused from years of work. Her eyes steady when she told me, "Baby, the world will tell you to be quiet. Don't you ever give them that gift." By the time the town hall arrived, my fear hadn't disappeared, it had transformed. It had become fuel. The atrium buzzed with chatter as employees gathered, their laughter and small talk masking the tension that always hovered when leadership entered the room. The executives sat up front, polished and comfortable, their voices carrying with practiced ease. I sat in the middle row, my notebook balanced on my lap, pen tapping against the paper. I waited. My pulse matched the rhythm of the mic as it passed from hand to hand. Questions about quarterly performance and new office perks filling the air. And then, silence. An opening. I felt my hand rise before I even registered the motion. The mic was passed to me, its weight unfamiliar but grounding in my grip. Dozens of eyes turned my way. The executives leaned forward, curious, expectant. My throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. "I have a question about accountability." The room shifted. The air grew taut, stretched between me and the men at the front of the stage. I could feel Tanya's eyes on me from across the atrium. Marcus's too. I took a breath, every word I had rehearsed clicking into place like gears in a machine. How does leadership plan to address situations where employee contributions are systematically minimized or erased? Particularly when those employees represent marginalized groups. What protections are in place to ensure that innovation is recognized fairly? Without bias? Silence again, a heavier one this time. I could see the flicker of surprise in their eyes, the subtle panic they tried to disguise with practiced smiles. One of them leaned forward, clearing his throat, stalling for time. And I knew then, I had cracked the facade. Because it wasn't just my question hanging in the air. It was the question of everyone who had ever felt invisible in this place. It was the question they couldn't answer without exposing themselves. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. The silence after my question at the town hall stretched so long it felt like the air itself was waiting. Eyes darted between me and the executives at the front, and I could sense the collective breath of the room tightening. One of the men finally spoke. His smile stretched too thin to be convincing. "Well, that's a thoughtful question," he began, voice slow and deliberate, the way people speak when they're buying themselves time. "At Redwood, we value collaboration. Every contribution matters, regardless of background." The words rang hollow. I caught Tanya shifting in her seat a few rows behind me, shaking her head ever so slightly. She heard it too, the deflection, the emptiness dressed up as reassurance. Another executive leaned in, eager to add polish. "We have systems in place to ensure fairness. Performance reviews, cross-department evaluations. We encourage open dialogue if someone feels overlooked." Open dialogue. My chest tightened. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I let the weight of my silence linger before I leaned closer to the microphone. "With all due respect," I said evenly, "it's hard to call it open dialogue when the same voices keep getting silenced. Systems only work when people trust them. And right now, some of us don't." The atrium grew so still I could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. The executives shifted in their seats, uncomfortable in a way that no quarterly report had ever made them. They tried to move on quickly. But the seed was already planted. I saw it in the eyes of my coworkers. Something had cracked open. Afterward, people stopped me in the hall. Some whispering, "Thank you," like a secret. Others simply giving a nod that carried more weight than words. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible, I felt dangerous. But danger cuts both ways. The very next morning, I walked into my office to find a surprise performance review scheduled. The email subject line read, "Constructive feedback session." My stomach sank, but my face stayed calm. I'd been expecting this. This was their retaliation, swift, quiet, meant to remind me who held the power. The review was a performance in itself. 2 managers sat across from me, their voices dripping with practiced concern. They told me my tone in meetings had been noticed. That I seemed defensive when receiving feedback. That team harmony mattered more than individual recognition. Each phrase landed like a coded message. Know your place. Don't get loud. Don't get visible. I listened, pen in hand, jotting down every word, not because I believed them but because I intended to remember them. When they finally asked if I had anything to say, I smiled. "Thank you for the feedback," I said smoothly. "I'll be sure to document my progress moving forward." The flicker in their eyes told me they caught the weight of that word, document. That night, at home, I spread the papers across my dining table. My evidence folder was no longer just a backup, it was an arsenal. And I realized something. If I wanted justice, I couldn't keep playing defense. I had to go on the offense. I started reaching out discreetly. A friend from business school who now worked as a journalist. A mentor who had left Redwood years ago after a similar review had stalled her career. Even Marcus from IT, who nervously admitted he had seen files rerouted to other managers before they reached me. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened. It wasn't just me. There was a pattern, a culture of erasure. Especially for people who looked like me. For women who spoke too clearly. For men who refused to bow their heads. Every late-night call, every coffee shop meeting felt like moving deeper into a story bigger than mine. My anger wasn't just personal anymore, it was collective. Still, I knew I couldn't rush. One wrong move and they'd paint me as bitter, unprofessional, ungrateful. I had to be strategic, precise, surgical. So I set the stage. I volunteered to lead a cross-department project that had just been announced, high profile. Messy, but perfect for visibility. They thought they were giving me enough rope to hang myself. What they didn't realize was that I was weaving that rope into a net. I kept meticulous records, CC'd the right people, built alliances carefully. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A senior executive tried to present part of my work as his own during a quarterly review with stakeholders. He clicked through slides I had built, recited phrases I had written, smiled as though the brilliance belonged to him. But this time, I was ready. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting clean through the room. "If you'll turn to slide 14, you'll see the original draft, timestamped, with my initials. I'd be happy to walk everyone through the process we used." The room froze. Stakeholders glanced at each other. Brows raised. The executive's face drained of color. His hand tightening on the clicker. I didn't wait for permission. I stood, walked to the front, and took the presentation back as if it had always been mine. Because it was. As I spoke, steady and clear, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just vindication. It was reclamation. The work I had bled into. The hours I had sacrificed. The brilliance they had tried to bury, it was alive again. Undeniable under the bright lights. When I finished, the applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real, and the executive who had tried to erase me, he couldn't even look me in the eye. Walking back to my seat, I knew the war was far from over. But the battlefield had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was advancing. And the higher they tried to climb over my work, the harder their fall would be when I pulled the ground out from beneath them. After the presentation, whispers followed me through the halls like a second shadow. Some were admiration, some envy, some caution. I didn't need to hear the words to know what people were thinking. Kendra's not afraid anymore. But Redwood's walls were built to absorb blows, not crumble at the first strike. The higher-ups regrouped fast. I could sense it in the way meetings grew colder, in how my calendar filled with performance consultations, while my colleagues walked free. They wanted to make me tired, to wear me down until even my victories tasted like ash. Instead, I sharpened my focus. One evening, Marcus slid into the break room with the quiet urgency of a man carrying something dangerous. He placed a USB drive in my hand, his eyes darting toward the security camera before meeting mine. "Check the folder marked archive," he whispered. "Don't ask me how I got it." That night, in my apartment with only the hum of the refrigerator for company, I opened the files. My pulse hammered in my ears. There it was. Proof that multiple projects had been systematically reassigned. Credit redistributed to senior staff. Names like mine cut out with surgical precision. There were email chains discussing how to manage Kendra's ambitions. Lines that read like strategy notes on how to contain a fire. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight. This wasn't paranoia. This was conspiracy. I thought about my father, who had worked 30 years at the plant only to be passed over for promotions by men half as qualified. I thought about my mother, who used to iron her uniform before every shift at the diner, telling me, "We can't afford to be average. Baby, we gotta be undeniable." Well, undeniable was here, glowing across my laptop screen. The next day, Tanya and I met at a diner across town. The kind with cracked leather booze and coffee that never tasted fresh but always came hot. She studied the files with a steady gaze, her expression somewhere between fury and heartbreak. "You know what this is?" she asked. "Evidence," I whispered. She nodded. "Evidence they'll bury if you don't move fast." We sat there for hours, plotting. Every plan felt like balancing on the edge of a blade. Go to HR? They were already compromised. Go to the board? Risky. Half of them were complicit. But go public? That was the nuclear option. The decision came a week later. Not in a flash of inspiration but in the steady drip of injustice. A junior analyst, a young black man barely out of college, pulled me aside after a meeting. His voice trembled when he said, "They cut me out of the report I wrote. Told me to stop asking questions." His eyes carried the same weight mine once had, doubt mixed with quiet rage. And I knew then, this wasn't just about me anymore. So I called in a favor. A journalist friend from grad school agreed to meet me in a quiet cafe on the west side. I slid the folder across the table, my hands shaking despite the calm in my voice. "This isn't just about stolen work," I said. "It's about a system that rewards theft and punishes truth. I need you to help me make it visible." She opened the files, her eyes widening as she scrolled. "Kendra, if this is real, it's not just a story. It's a reckoning." That word lingered. Reckoning. 2 weeks later, Redwood's polished image cracked wide open. The article hit like a thunderclap. Screenshots of emails, testimonies from former employees, quotes that made it impossible to deny. My name wasn't front and center, but the fingerprints of my fight were everywhere. The office buzzed with shock. Some people avoided me altogether, afraid to be associated with the storm. Others sought me out quietly, their whispers fierce. "We've been waiting for this." Leadership scrambled. Emergency meetings, PR statements dripping with polished apologies, promises of reviewing internal practices. But no statement could erase the truth now printed in black and white. Shared across every platform, dissected on talk shows and morning radio. The climax came when Redwood scheduled a press conference to clarify the situation. I stood in the back of the packed atrium, cameras flashing, reporters leaning forward like wolves circling prey. The CEO stepped up, his tie perfectly knotted, his tone rehearsed. "We take these allegations seriously. Redwood stands for integrity." My blood boiled at that word, integrity. When the floor opened for questions, my journalist friend raised her hand. "How does Redwood explain the internal documents showing deliberate efforts to reassign credit from marginalized employees to senior leadership?" The CEO faltered. His mouth opened, then closed. He stuttered something about isolated misunderstandings. And in that silence, in that hesitation, the truth roared louder than any denial. I watched it unfold with a calm I hadn't known I could feel. This was no longer about survival. It was about transformation. Redwood wasn't just being questioned, it was being forced to reckon with itself. And me? I wasn't in the shadows anymore. I was right where I was meant to be. Visible. Undeniable. Unafraid. The city felt heavier that morning. As if even the skyline knew something was about to break. I walked into the glass tower with my chin high. But inside, my stomach twisted tight. For weeks, I had been building toward this moment, gathering files, recording conversations, pulling receipts that showed what really went on behind those polished boardroom doors. I wasn't just carrying a folder, I was carrying the truth. And truth, I knew, could cut sharper than any blade. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, eyes followed me, whispers crawled through the hall, quick and sharp like static. I didn't need to hear the words, I could feel the tension. People had sensed the storm gathering. And now, I was walking in as its lightning strike. Inside the boardroom, Redwood sat at the head of the table, his silver cufflinks catching the light. Around him, the leadership team looked uneasy, glancing at their phones, their notes, anywhere but at me. I set my folder down, each page inside a weapon ready to be unleashed. My voice stayed calm, steady. I think it's time the truth is spoken. And not just whispered in hallways. A murmur rippled. Redwood leaned back, smirking like a man who thought control was still his. Careful, Kendra, you don't want to ruin your career over. I cut him off. Over integrity? Over lives ruined while you profited? Over women and men who worked themselves sick, silenced when they spoke up, discarded when they couldn't carry more weight. The room froze. For the first time, I saw Redwood's smirk falter. I opened the folder and slid the first set of documents across the table. Emails. Expense reports. Compliance files showing the cover-ups. One by one, faces around the table shifted. Fear, shame, some, even relief. The silence was thick, broken only by the soft shuffle of papers. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. My calm was louder than anger. Redwood finally spoke, his voice low and sharp. You think you can take me down with paperwork? I leaned in, meeting his eyes. Not just paperwork, with truth, and the truth doesn't need permission to be seen. The double doors of the boardroom opened suddenly. In walked a journalist I had quietly tipped off. Camera crew at her side. Gasps echoed. The leadership team stiffened. Redwood's face drained of color. This is private, he barked. The journalist, a black woman with the kind of presence that filled every corner, replied, not anymore. Too many lives have been broken by what's been hidden here. The public deserves to know. The room erupted. Some executives demanded order. Others tried to collect their things. But the cameras rolled, and every frantic gesture, every stammered denial, was caught on tape. I stood rooted, steady, my voice cutting through the chaos. This company taught me something. Silence protects the powerful, but truth protects the people. And I choose truth. Redwood lunged to grab the papers. But another executive, one who had always stayed silent, stood and blocked him. Enough, Charles. You've run this place like a kingdom. That ends today. The crack in Redwood's armor widened. His voice rose, desperate now. You'll all regret this. Without me, this company collapses. But his words didn't land. The cameras caught every ounce of his desperation. His arrogance. What was once untouchable now looked pathetic. And I realized then, he wasn't a giant. He was a man terrified of losing the throne he never truly earned. I gathered my folder, sliding it shut. My hands were steady now, my pulse strong. I glanced around the table, at faces that finally dared to look back. Some with gratitude, some with fear, others with newfound courage. This isn't just about me, I said, my voice firm but not cold. It's about every person who gave their sweat and soul to this place and deserved respect. Not exploitation. This is about rewriting what power looks like. The journalist nodded, signaling her crew, we have more than enough. As they left the room, Redwood slumped into his chair, smaller than I'd ever seen him. No words left, no power to swing. I walked out of the boardroom into the hall where employees had gathered. Drawn by the commotion, their eyes followed me. Some wide with shock. Others with tears. Others still with something I hadn't seen in a long time here. Hope. I didn't smile. Not yet. The fight wasn't over. Not until the truth was fully told and justice followed. But for the first time, I felt the ground shift under my feet, tilting away from fear and toward freedom. My heels clicked against the polished floor, echoing through the tower. This time, the sound wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. When I stepped outside that glass tower, the cool air wrapped around me like a reminder. The storm had broken. But the world was still turning. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from release. For so long, I had carried the weight of silence. The fear of being too much, of standing alone. But in that boardroom, I learned something I'll never forget. When the truth walks in, lies don't stand a chance. I thought back to the long nights staring at ceilings, wondering if speaking up was worth the risk. I thought of my grandmother's voice in my head, telling me, "Baby, your silence don't protect you. It just builds a cage around your spirit." She had lived her life in a world that never gave her the titles or the recognition she deserved. But she taught me that dignity isn't something a company or a man can hand you, it's something you claim. And I knew, looking at the faces in those halls, that this wasn't just my fight. This was for every young black woman told she was too ambitious. Every black man pushed aside for being too outspoken. Every person who carried the burden of proving themselves twice over in spaces that never wanted to see them win. My story was just one thread in a tapestry of resistance and survival. But here's the truth. Revenge wasn't the real victory. Power wasn't in humiliating Redwood on camera. It was in choosing not to let his corruption define me. It was in refusing to shrink. In standing tall enough for others to see it was possible. Revenge fades, but accountability, justice, change, those can last. I know some of you listening are walking through your own battles right now. Maybe it's a boss who doubts you, a system that overlooks you, a world that tells you to play small. Maybe you've been carrying your silence like armor, afraid of what happens when you finally speak. Hear me when I say this, your truth has weight, your story has power, and when you speak it, you're never just speaking for yourself, you're speaking for the ones who came before you, and the ones who will come after. I didn't win by matching Redwood's arrogance. I won by choosing to believe that my voice mattered, even when the room wanted me quiet. And so does yours. So if you're watching this, take this with you. Don't confuse survival with silence. Don't let fear trick you into believing you're alone. You are not. And when you stand in your truth, when you refuse to let corruption or disrespect break you, you're planting seeds of freedom for somebody else. 2. This is bigger than one office, one company, one woman. This is about reclaiming our right to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. And to everyone out there, black women, black men, anyone who's ever felt unseen in a place that used your labor but denied your worth, remember, you don't have to wait for permission to stand in your power. The world may try to write your story, but the pen is in your hands. So let's write it bold, let's write it honest, and let's write it together. Like if you've ever had to fight for what's right. Raised fist, dark skin tone. Share to inspire someone who feels powerless. Let them know change is possible. Glowing star. Comment your story. Let's rise, learn, and heal together. Speech balloon.